you notice this work in progress up here. I asked Wayne Manning, Dale and I sometimes feel like we're a little far away from everybody, so I asked Wayne if he could construct this small ark, and Wayne only builds things very well, so it did concern me. I saw Tim Miller up here earlier, and I was worried that there would be like a trap door. I haven't found one yet, so if anything happens, you can blame Tim for that. But we really are glad that you're here today. I want to start by saying this. Instincts are very hard to fight, aren't they? When you have a natural instinct to do something, we all have them from one degree to another, and when our instincts kick in, the reaction is natural. We don't have to think about it, it just happens. Most of what we do is instinctual. Breathing, blinking, smiling, crying. If I were to throw a ball at you, Matt, your instincts should kick in and you would want to either defend yourself or catch it. If I raise my hand to do a high five, you probably will instinctually, you don't have to think about it, you just do that back. It just happened naturally. Well, yesterday, in fact, I was in our kitchen and my son Elijah was enjoying what I think is the perfect breakfast food, which is a brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tart. And my favorite, I think it might be the perfect food. And I remember at one time I thought how odd it was, because I don't know if you've ever checked this out, but on a Pop-Tart box, on the end, there are instructions for how to heat up a Pop-Tart. And my natural instinct kicks in and I think, who needs instructions to figure this thing out? That doesn't even make sense to me. Who can't naturally figure out this complex mystery of nature about how to get this out of here? But there's a whole end of the box, and it says Pop-Tart toasting instructions. Number 1, remove pastry from pouch. Well, that's assuming that this not very smart person could get the box open first. But let's say they figured out that the pouch is inside. Now they got to open this thing. But look at instruction number 2, warm pastry in toaster appliance. What makes you think that if they can't figure this out, they can operate a toaster? Right? This person should not be allowed out of the house. Now, my instincts would be, if I were to work, let's say, at Pop-Tart, see, I think this is kind of funny, and I would want to meet it there. I would want to add something to the Pop-Tart instruction. If it were me, what I would do is I would put on the side of the box, Pop-Tart heating instruction, okay? For those too stupid to figure it out on your own. That's what I would want to print. But you can't do that, right? You can't really say that out loud because you've got to put those instructions on there. There are even microwave instructions. Do you know how long it takes to microwave a Pop-Tart? 3 seconds. 3 seconds. I mean, how long does it take to toast one? Probably 45 seconds a minute? If your life is so crammed that you don't have time to toast a Pop-Tart, you might want to loosen up the schedule a little bit, I think. But instincts, they're hard to fight. That's my point. Most things we do should come naturally, without any instruction. And it's only when we're being asked to go against our natural flow, when we're being asked to go against what we would naturally do, that's where the rub comes in. If you were not here last week, you did not hear that I have made a commitment to go against one of my natural instincts for this entire year. I have made a commitment for the year of 2012 that I will not tell a Kentucky joke. You all don't know how hard that's going to be. Because probably 3 times a day, Dale, that's a Freudian slip, probably 3 times a day, Dale swings the door wide open. And it's like a gift sitting there, ready to be opened. And so I'm going to kill it. I'm looking for a substitute state, okay? I've crossed Indiana is off my list. Right now, what's on the list is West Virginia and Southern Ohio. I'm open to other suggestions. But my commitment is no Kentucky jokes for this entire year. That goes against my natural instinct. Well, Jesus had a habit of asking us to do things that go against our instincts. He spent 3 years teaching what I would call a new normal. He said, love your enemies. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. He said, turn the other cheek. He said, pray for people who are against you. And I'm like, Jesus, I don't like my neighbor. He doesn't care. He wants us to go against the grain of what most people think normal is. Well, I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to go against some of my instincts. Most of the time, to do what Jesus wants us to do means not saying the things that we want to say. It means not reacting how we really want to react. Not hurting when we really want to hurt. We're not thinking how we normally think. But we have a lot to cover in the next few minutes. We're getting started a little late, so I'm going to go as fast as I can, but we got a lot of stuff to cover. So let me give you a little roadmap of what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes. We're going to talk about three things. First of all, we're going to define abnormal. Then we're going to talk about choo-choo trains and sneakers. And then we're going to close with how to use a funnel. Okay? So those three things. It's a very spiritual morning, so get yourself ready. Okay? Here's my opening question. I want to ask you this. How many of you grew up in the church? You grew up in the church. Okay? Look around. Keep your hands up. Okay? I'm going to say 85% easily. How many of you did not grow up in the church? This is my group. You did not grow up in the church. Okay? This is me. I did not grow up in the church until late high school and almost college. Okay? Now, what you need to realize is that because of the way that you just raised your hand, the other group that didn't raise your hand, they're abnormal to you. Okay? In fact, if you want to, turn to somebody and just say, you're abnormal. Go ahead. Do it right now. I heard one wife say to her husband, I've always told you. No, you are, because as you grew up, whatever your normal was, you learned to speak a certain way, to act a certain way, to think a certain way, and anybody outside of that box for you is not your normal. And we need to understand that on a daily basis, and even here this morning, those two versions of normal collide. And they collide at work, and they collide at school, and they collide everywhere that we go. And maneuvering that is a big deal. Jesus had the same problem. There's a scripture I want to show you in Mark chapter 3, and it said, "For he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the evil spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, 'You are the Son of God.' But he gave them strict orders not to tell who he was." See, by this time in his ministry, Jesus is enormously popular. Everywhere that he went, huge crowds followed, because for the first time in 4,000 years, somebody was teaching a new normal. He was rocking the boat. He was saying things that nobody before had ever said, and people were hungry for that new message. But it caused them some problems. And look at that last sentence. I think that's amazing. He gave them strict orders not to tell anyone who he was. That's not normal. I mean, for a good leader, once you're getting popular, don't you want your popularity to spread? Wouldn't you want everybody to know that you're on board and you're ready to go? That goes against what normal is. I mean, do you think for a minute, as this election year starts, do you think any candidate would not want you to know if they did something extraordinary? I mean, for crying out loud, they have film crews following them around so you can see what they do. Jesus was just the opposite. This wasn't the only time in his 3 years that he said this. Many times after he performed a miracle, he would heal a person, and then he would immediately follow by saying, "Don't tell anybody about this. Just go, be about your normal life. Don't say a word." Why is that? Well, I believe there's a couple reasons that Jesus didn't want the word to spread like that. See, in that era, there were already a lot of magicians and fortune tellers. And I think the first reason Jesus didn't want word to spread is because he didn't want to get pinned into that category that he was some kind of a carnival sideshow. And there's a second reason that I want to talk to you about here in a few moments. But before I do that, I like to read a lot, and I read a book here a little while back, and it's by a guy named Leonard Sweet, and it's called "Jesus Drives Me Crazy." That's the name of the book. And in it he says this: "Church people seem to have special names for people who don't go to church. They call them lost, unsaved, seekers, unbelievers, worldly, or even more blatantly, pagan or heathen. But there's a church in North Carolina called Warehouse 242. That's the name of the church. And they refer, in their church family, they refer to each other and to non-Christians with one word. Guess what that word is? They call non-Christians normal. They're trying to win normal people. You see, there is a wisdom and a way of doing things that to the world is normal. And then there is a wisdom and a way of doing things that to Christ followers is normal. And they are very, very different. People who follow Jesus, we're the abnormal ones. Right? And this is a big thing to wrap your head around if you've always grown up in the church, because you may have always thought that this is the way that everybody thinks. Christ followers are deviations from the norm. They mess up the world as it is. They draw outside the lines. They think outside the box. They resist any off-the-shelf solutions. Christians simply can't do normal. See, once you become a disciple of Jesus, if you take it seriously, normal isn't good enough anymore. See, when I first started going to church, and when I said I didn't grow up in church, I didn't go at all. We had a great family. We just didn't do the church thing. We were campers, and my parents were square dancers. All right? So maybe I shouldn't make fun of any state, actually. But that was my life. And every weekend, that's what we did. We left at 5 o'clock on Friday. The camper was ready. We went to the campground, and my parents and all of Dad's brothers and sisters, they square danced all weekend. And us cousins, I don't know what we did. We just roamed the campground all weekend long. But church was not even on the radar screen. And then all of a sudden in late high school I started going, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I thought you people had lost your mind. I felt like I'd landed on another planet. I mean, you're all carrying these books around, and they're different colors, and some are big and some are little, and I thought that they were just coffee table things. That's what my grandma did. She had this great big white one that sat on our coffee table that weighed 700 pounds, and the page never turned. It just sat there all the time. But all of a sudden I go to church and you're carrying these things around. And you sing out loud. And you play organ music, which is good in church, but that's not normal anywhere else. And so I went to church the first few times, and all of a sudden, on some cue, people would stand up, and then they would sit down, and then they would bow their heads, and they seemed to know what was going on. And I was sitting there lost, thinking, what in the world have I landed into? At one point, they passed out these trays of really stale crackers and little things of juice. I mean, if I need a drink break, give me like a Gatorade, you know? Not a little juice cup. And I didn't know. Nobody said why they were doing it. It was like everybody in the club knew what was going on, but I didn't. I remember the first baptism I saw. I mean, I was sitting there in church. At the end of it, the preacher guy, he stood up and said a few things, and we stood up and sang again. And this one guy came forward, and then they talked for a minute, and they exchanged some secret vow thing, and then they disappeared. And we sang some more. And I was thinking in my head, where'd they go? Where did they take him? And a few minutes later, after the song, they appeared in this water tub that I didn't even know was there until that point, in karate clothes. I'm like, odd. And I could hear the water, and I see them step down in there, and you would not believe what happened. The one guy, the preacher guy, he grabbed the other guy and slammed him underwater. And everybody else around me, instead of thinking it was weird, they all went, yeah, that's awesome. What? What just happened? I mean, so if you're here the first time today, what you saw earlier, that's not normal, is it? I mean, they all look normal until the one guy kneeled down and all the other guys put their hands on him. See, we know what that means. And we know where we get those instructions. We know why we baptize, and we believe in that. We know why we set aside elders, and we believe that. But to the world, gang, that's not normal. It's not the way that they think. What we're doing here right now is not normal. There are more people this morning in bed, or they just got up and they're going to have some coffee and read the paper and get ready for kickoff at 1 o'clock. That's what normal people do. Which leads me naturally to choo-choo trains and sneakers. Okay? So hang with me here for a second. Keep that in mind. I want to switch gears. I like to read a lot. I probably read 3 books a week. I'm a nerd. I love to read. And a lot of what I've been reading lately, my library has grown with books about the topic that we're talking about right now. And a guy named Erwin McManus has expanded my thinking on this. And he says in his book, Unstoppable Force, there's 2 ways to do church. Okay? One way is like a locomotive. Okay, as a church, you plan all your programs and you set a schedule like Sunday morning and Wednesday night, and you commit all your monies and you set all your ministries and you get on that train and you go. You go from September to Christmas, and then you go from January till right after Mother's Day, and you just go on those tracks. And if something outside of expectation comes out, a special need or a special project, we can look out the windows and see that project, and we would go, wow, that's too bad. We can pray for you, but we can't derail the train. It's already going down the tracks. Then he poses a second way to do church. And there's a growing number of churches that are looking at it this way, that instead of a locomotive, what if it looked like a group of people, like us, a church family, that were just taking a walk together? What if we had a direction we were going, but there was some lateral mobility built into that direction, so that if we came along and we saw a special need, we saw a family that was hurting or somebody in town that needed us, we could say, hey, let's go over there for a while. Now let me ask you, and be honest, which one did Jesus do? See, I know that right now, between the groups of people that raised your hand, there's some stretching going on, and please hear me say this. If you grew up and you were used to the locomotive style, going to church on Sunday morning and Wednesday night, and that was your schedule, I understand how hard that is to break away from that. I want to tell you that the elders and the staff have done nothing but spend the last 1.5 years that Dale and I have been here talking about this, because we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We don't. And so we've worked really hard in the last few months to make sure that we maintain a sense of schedule and rhythm for those of you who've grown up in the church. But at the same time, we realize that can't be all that we do. You see, a lot of churches, when they come to this realization, that here's what they do. They decide to go all one way or all the other. My home church just did this. Without getting any information from the congregation at all, they decided we're going to go after a new group of people. And so in a 2-week period, they totally remodeled the sanctuary that had been there for 100 years, and took the pews out and put chairs in, and the band was on the stage, and everything was different. And I think that's catastrophic thinking, because that doesn't honor anybody. And so what we've tried really hard to do is honor the past, but prepare for the future. That's why we have at 10:10 every Sunday morning, we're having a time that we can enjoy hymns, because those are from our heritage, aren't they? I love that. That's why we're going to do that. That's why Dale is writing a newsletter every Sunday morning for the people that come to that time. That's why we don't want to replace the choir. We want the choir to sing more. In fact, the choir is starting this Wednesday night, and if you love to sing, we'd love to see 70 people in the choir with Ron and his ministry. Starts this Wednesday night. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but here's the second thing that we know. I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you know someone, I asked this last week, how many of you know someone who believes in God but doesn't go to church? Look around. Don't put your hands down. Look around. Because here's my question. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Because, gang, in this book, I don't think we have an option not to do anything. And they're not just going to all of a sudden wake up one Sunday morning and mosey into our building. We, as a church family, we've got to be able to save some of our time and energy to be able to go after those people. So let me begin to wrap up by saying this. I want to talk about how to use a funnel. Okay? Because here's the picture of how we're going to try to do both of these things. Up there on the screen, you'll see that we have below the horizontal line, we have what we've always had, and that is WCC, Wilmington Church of Christ, a classic version. Everything that's always been. Sunday school classes and small groups and ministries and music and all the things that have always made us who we are, that's below that funnel. What we'd like to do starting today is make a concentrated effort to move into adding a top half of that funnel to be able to go out and find those people who are desperately needing Jesus Christ and they don't even know it. And in that category, we're calling WCC Community Impact. So on the bottom there, Amy, if you could go to the next one, you can barely see this, but on the bottom, we're going to continue to do all those things. The ministries, student impact, Kids City, everything. And Dale is going to concentrate primarily on that part of our funnel. On the top half of the funnel, Amy, if you could hit that, we're going to do things like 517, Alpha, which you'll hear more about in the next few weeks, Upward Sports, and the Cave. Guys, I'm telling you, this is why we needed Casanos for the Cave. Because there are guys who need God, but they would never dare walk into our building. That's nothing against our building. That's more about where they're at, not where we're at. And so we want to meet them halfway, guys. And if you're a guy and you struggle with being a guy and you want to be a better guy, would you consider coming up to Casanos one of these Wednesday nights? We meet at 7:30 to eat some pizza. At 8 o'clock we have our study. And it's a phenomenal deal. I would love to have you there. But we want you to know that we know it's okay that everybody's not going to be attracted to both parts of that funnel. Some of you, because of the way that you're wired, you're more drawn to one or the other. I'm more drawn, Rachel is too, we're more drawn to the upper half of that funnel because that's where I came from. That's the language that I understand. And so that's where I'm going to be spending most of my energies starting today is in the top half of that funnel. And what I'm trying to find are like-minded people that would come along there with us. But here's what I want to say. Spectating is not an option. Whichever path you feel more passionate about, that's awesome. But spectating is not what Christianity is about. It's a participation sport. Our dream, the theme today is boots on the ground. No more talking theory. No more talking about what if. Let's put our boots on the ground and let's start getting something done. And by the end of this year, here would be the dream. That we could walk up to each other, no matter who you are, and I could walk up to you and say, Matt, what's your ministry? Tony, what's your ministry? What do you do? Whether it's here in this building or out in the community, what are you doing to use your personality, your wiring, your passions for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ? As I close here, I'd like to Carrie Barker and all of the Upward coaches and referees, if you would begin to work your way towards the front of the building. Just kind of come up here and gather around Carrie, if you would. And let me talk about this as we get ready to close. Here's the question. So what? Big deal. What's this have to do with any of us? Well, if you saw the insert today in the program, we're going to take a walk as a church rather than put us on a set of train tracks. Okay? We're going to take our year. If you have an insert in your program, instead of dividing the year into two big chunks, we're going to divide the year into several seasons that last about 40 days. Okay? Season 1 begins next Sunday, January 15th, and it lasts until February 19th. That's Season 1. We kick it off with 517 next Sunday night. We'd love to have all of you come. And then we kick off Season 2, February 19th, and it goes to April 1st, which is Palm Sunday. What that allows us to do is it allows us to take the calendar year and break it into bite-sized chunks, and it allows us as a church to see if we need to make any adjustments. As we walk down this journey together, it allows us to see, hey, maybe we need to go over here for a while and spend some extra time. Well, in this Season 1, one of our highlights is represented by this group. We want to go from a church that has hosted Upward Sports to a church that embraces Upward Sports. I'm telling you, this gang standing right here, they get to be in the trenches starting tomorrow, right? Practice starts tomorrow. I was just an Upward football coach over there where we live. I had no idea what it was going to mean. We had these 3 little boys from a very tough neighborhood in Centreville that got to join our team, and I fell in love with these kids. And Upward is designed to introduce Jesus Christ. It sneaks up on families with sports. But then these guys are the pastors. These guys and gals. They're the pastors. And so what we want to do this morning is, first of all, I want to extend a thank you from our church to this man right here. He had a vision several years back, and to be able to bring this, the way Upward Sports runs is they will only let one program come into an area, and we get to be the host of Upward Sports here in Wilmington because of this great room that we have. Kerry took it on himself. He did all the hard work, and it is a lot of work to do that. And he's committed to do this 2 more years as we work to find somebody to replace him. So now he's really committed, because I just said it out loud to everybody. But he really is. But here's what we want to do, is as we head into this season tomorrow, I want all of us to be able to join with them in praying for this season, because it's not just basketball game. These little boys and girls, they come from homes that are messed up. They come with their own version of normal. And they get a chance in the next 3 months to be introduced to a new version of normal because of this game. And many of these guys, all of them, they're volunteers. They have full-time jobs, so they're going to be rushing in here to practice and spending their Saturdays for the games. So I want us as a church family to pray for this group of pastors. Okay? So you guys, I'd like for you guys to huddle in here together around Carrie, if you would. And I'm just going to lift up a prayer for all of us. I know we're guys, but don't be afraid to touch each other. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this group of people standing here. I don't know why you reached into their hearts and convinced them to give up their time and energy. But God, I'm so grateful that you have. I thank you that you led Kerry to follow his vision for Upward Sports. And I pray that you will guide him and give him the extra energy he needs. I pray for every coach, for every referee, that every time we come in contact with a little child or their families, I pray that instead of seeing a basketball coach or a referee, they get to see Jesus with skin on. So God, I pray that your Holy Spirit would fill up everybody in the circle as the season begins tomorrow. Pray that 3 months from now a difference will be made because of this commitment. In your name I pray. Amen. I want you guys to hang.